we've got the reform for President Trump and his agenda being obstructed. And I expected this to happen. And I knew that the judges in the court system would be part of it. And I discussed a good deal of that. I discussed a number of different things related to the foreign direct investment. The gold and silver markets were exploding at the time, at the end of March. And we've since had some rather serious setbacks in all financial markets, which I will discuss shortly. But the site is golden-jackass.com, and I invite people to go and subscribe, make a consult call payment, make a donation if you don't care about, written reports and want to support my work following many of the shows, the interviews that I do. But these are exciting times and historical times, and I think we're on the edge of either a hot revolution or a peaceful demolition of the Democrat Party and all of their devices to install Marxism and corruption and to legitimize it. I think we're probably going to have a peaceful revolution. I'm giving that 10-1 odds in favor. These are just very dangerous times. It's disgusting, the level of criminality. The court systems are now being put to use for the Obama judges to sustain the fraud. And the NGO, non-government organization funding to install Marxist communism, to install disruptions, to install sabotage of the economy. Very interesting times.
Stock markets have had a violent correction in the past week. What do you see ahead for the stock markets?
I think it's going to stabilize. I really don't expect a lot more or even much more decline. We had a bounce this morning. I really don't think we're going to have a complete decline wreckage. I don't see that at all. I see some very interesting concepts, and I might as well mention it here. There's something called the Fed valuation model, that when interest rates go down, the stock market goes up. The S&P goes up, the Dow Jones goes up, the NASDAQ goes up, the big three. But sometimes the interest rates go down for unusual reasons having to do with control and manipulation, like during the lockdown. So we had big stock market up rallies 3 and 4 years ago when they were locking down the economy and they didn't want everything to fall apart, so they lowered interest rates. And it causes tremendous problems. It skews the property market with respect to mortgages. But usually when interest rates go down, the stock market goes up. And if you're at the end of a typical cycle, like you had a big boom and now things are beginning to enter a recession and interest rates fall down and profits had been bad for a while, so the stock market had been going down for a while, the lowering of interest rates would trigger the revival. It would trigger an economic rebound, but only after a recession was recognized and realized in the form of lower profits from corporations. Okay, we have now entered about year number 15 of extreme manipulation and control. It was about 8 years ago they tried to raise interest rates and remove some of the manipulation, and they almost destroyed the entire system. Okay, I don't think we're going to see a complete collapse. We had some very scary days with enormous declines, and I think we're about done. We got the point across, and let me say something that's really quite important and significant. I think we saw stocks down, certain bonds down, like junk bonds and maybe secondary corporate bonds down. We saw gold and silver down. We saw Bitcoin down and some of the leading cryptos down. And I believe the motive was to cause tremendous damage across the board in order to produce strong demand for U.S. Treasuries. They're trying to produce a Treasury bond rally. They're trying to bring down interest rates. They're trying to bring enormous demand. Sell your gold, buy Treasury bonds. Sell Bitcoin, buy Treasury bonds. Sell the S&P and NASDAQ, buy Treasury bonds. Because the big banks are in such incredible trouble with, I still think it's like well over 450, maybe over $500 billion in unrealized losses. They need a Treasury bond rally to get out from under their terrible situation and position in Treasury bonds, because they were obligated to buy at the ridiculous, manipulated, absurd, and criminal low interest rates for the last several years. So I think once we get a good rally in the Treasury bonds, that'll be about it for the decline in stocks, because the decline in stocks fed the Treasury bond rally. When we get the rally in bonds, it'll be pretty much all over. I just don't think we're going to get a tremendous decline. Not really. Not anymore in stocks.
The U.S. dollars had a significant pullback after a high early in the year. Are you bullish or bearish on the U.S. dollar?
Well, it's a complicated issue. When you mention the dollar, it's really difficult to respond unless you define what it is. And I know that's a very strange thing to say, but the dollar is losing value with respect to its purchasing power. The dollar is losing value with respect to gold. But the dollar is remaining strong with respect to many other currencies, and that is beginning to change as you see the dollar index, which is absurd. The dollar index is an absurd entity, but it's all laced through the financial markets. It's basically a toilet measure. How stinky is the dollar relative to the other stinky currencies? Well, the dollar index is 52% the euro. Well, the euro is in deep trouble because they decided to commit suicide with Russian sanctions and dismantle their economy and industry. So the dollar is being measured against the euro, which is committing suicide. Okay, we're in uncharted waters. I really don't think the dollar is going to vanish. I don't think the dollar is going to be destroyed in value. I think it's going to be contorted in a number of different ways. We're still going to see the dollar lose its purchasing power, the price of almost everything in the U.S. economy. But the dollar is going to be the choice for people and institutions selling their own currencies and looking for safe haven. And a lot has been turned upside down by the tariff wars, and it's not really clear, but I will get to the tariff issue in subsequent questions. I think the dollar disappearance and destruction is overblown. I'm tired of that question. I'm tired of that fear. That's a fear of the ignorant. If the dollar just vanishes suddenly, then you have several million corporations and small businesses in the United States that won't have any currency to use. That's not going to happen. The goal is for the White Alliance to establish a seamless transition, and I think that will largely happen with the quantum financial system for banking and transactions. We're in uncharted waters, but I don't expect the dollar will lose much more value. Versus what? Versus other toilet entries? I mean, it's just ridiculous. How strong is the European economy? How strong is the British economy? They're in tatters. So the dollar's going to decline versus that? I don't think so. Okay, I'm telling you, this is a multifaceted issue with the dollar, and it's going to be quite confusing for a period of months.
Does it look like inflation and interest rates are under control in the U.S.?
Well, inflation is a very difficult concept. I'm sorry, most everything in the financial sector is difficult to define, control, and to discuss because we've had such astounding distortions and manipulations. Okay, I think we're going to see inflation subdued for prices in the United States. And let me describe this because there are many sides. To control price inflation, typically in a macroeconomic sense, you bring into control the price of food and fuel. And fuel is, gasoline and diesel. We're going to see that because the sabotage from the Biden show is largely over. They're still fighting, but they're not sabotaging diesel refineries. They're not cutting off the natural gas flow from Canada. We have other issues of the tariff to, undermine that, to be sure. I think we're going to see some real progress with the price of food, gasoline, and diesel, food and fuel. Now, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, said something extraordinarily stupid about a month ago. He said the tariffs will not result in price inflation in the United States. Well, I don't know where he got his economics credentials, apparently in a Cracker Jack box. If he thinks for 1 minute that foreign suppliers are going to absorb the losses and not pass on the tariff costs, he's a knucklehead. He's a nitwit. We've already seen the increase of prices of pretty much everything out of Canada. They've passed on the tariff costs. So we're going to see any nation that remains an adversary without the mutual agreement with respect to foreign direct investment toward production in the United States. Any nation that does not come to an accord is going to see tariffs, and it's going to see, I think, price increases for everything they ship into the United States. Maybe they'll ship nothing into the United States. I think the tariffs are a tremendously powerful negotiating tool. But back to inflation. Food and fuel, I think, is going to go down in price. Insurance is probably going to remain a problem because insurance companies aren't making any money on their nut. Where are they making any money on treasury bonds? They're not. So they're going to continue to raise prices for insurance. Interest rates are going to be a point of extreme conflict between Trump and the BlackRock agent who's operating as the Fed chairman named Jerome Powell. Powell, I think, is part of the camp that wants to sabotage Trump. So he's probably not going to lower interest rates. And what we might actually see is the 10-year Treasury bond yield might go below the 2-year and the 1-year Treasury bill yield. I don't know. I mean, it would be magnificent if we got an inversion where the 10-year was below the 2-year. That would signal extreme recession. Okay, I believe that we've been in an inflationary depression for the last 4 years. With the lockdown, we had very little economic activity. So how could they claim that we had economic growth when many things were shut down? There's a lot of extreme stupidity and propaganda in the national economic and financial statistics. I think we're likely to see the Treasury bond yield go down. That's the long-term rates. Continue to go down. And I don't think it's going to put life back into the mortgage market and, property market. That's, got one leg in the morgue, one leg in the cemetery. This is an extremely complex situation in almost everything that has to do with finance and economics.
Last week, gold was above 3150 US. Then it got hit along with the stock markets. Where to go to from here for gold?
Oh, I think it's going to stabilize and then continue going up. It might need a month to stabilize. We've got to sort out a lot of the criminality with respect to gold leasing. And note something of rather high importance. We were told there was an audit coming for Fort Knox. We were told that we were going to find out the contents and value of the Fort Knox gold. And then all these other stories came out, like U.S. aid and the magic money machine and Ukraine problems with the ceasefire and numerous other problems with the federal judges and obstructing Trump's orders. And we kind of forgot about Fort Knox. And then when they got back to Fort Knox, they simply said, oh, the gold's all there. Let's move along. Well, that's not sufficient for me. I think what happened is Fort Knox had an audit. It concluded that a lot of gold was there, maybe not all. And they had no idea whatsoever who the owner is of the gold in Fort Knox. So rather than make a big issue out of the leasing problem, they decided to make a big problem out of federal judges, out of Ukraine, and other issues, like, USAID and funding of, stupidity, like, the transgender fish and non-binary cows. Okay, this is really, really getting stupid with respect to the human species and its attributes. I believe gold is going to stabilize, and then there'll be kind of an aha wake-up moment where, hey, we still have a U.S. government debt problem, and it's not going away. We still have a big bank problem, and their unrealized bank asset losses, their underwater status, is not going away. We still have a problem with supply into the United States from imports, and a lot of problems and disruptions with respect to tariffs, and the deficit is not going away. But we do have commitments for rather large-scale foreign direct investment and U.S. corporate return of direct investment, like Johnson & Johnson and the U.S. automakers. The automakers are going to leave, to some degree, Mexican plants. There'll be a lot of unemployment among the Mexicans, and they're going to bring back industry for the car making to the United States. Okay, that's a return of investment, and what it does is it offsets some of the trade imbalance, because the current account deficit is the trade deficit plus the current account deficit. And if the current account is positive, it offsets some of the trade deficit. In other words, if you bring in a lot more imports than you export, you can offset it with billions that come in to make new plant and equipment toward production in the near future. Okay, I think gold is going to go up again soon and get above 3,100. It's really almost laughable what's going on. I know a lot of people are sweating bullets and thinking, oh my gosh, are we going to go back to $27 silver? I don't think so. Are we going to go back to 2,500 gold? I don't think so. It took only about 14 months ago from 2,000 to 3,000 gold. We got up to like 3,150, and now we're playing around at 2,550 and 3,050, and who gives a crap? I mean, I'm tired of being a little angry, but geez Louise, we went up over 1,000 points in 14, 15 months. We come down 200 points, and everybody's panicking. Grow a pair. Grow up. Silver is a different story. Silver went to about 35, and it backed off again. Got to say something about silver. I know it's not in the question. Oh, it's the next question. I'll leave silver for the next question. I think we're going to see a bounce when everybody realizes we still have a U.S. government debt crisis. We still have a war. Trump is trying to move the war from Ukraine to the Middle East, and he's doing a good job so far. We're not done with the trade battles. We're not done with the leasing criminality with gold. We're not done with the vacating, emptying of London's gold market and vaults. We're not done with any of these things that brought us 3,000 gold. So we stabilize and then we continue moving up.
Late March, silver was over $35 an ounce. In October, silver was just under 35. Silver got hit this past week along with the stock markets. Could silver have put in a double top?
I don't really concern myself with a double top. I concern myself with the criminality in leasing silver and the gigantic demand from China and India. Here's just a point to consider. The Swiss, Basel, Switzerland, Basel, Bank for International Settlement, BIS, aka Basel. They've got enormous tonnage of silver. So the question is, are they going to dump silver into the market in metal form to complete the decline in silver, knowing that China and India are the major buyers of that silver? Will Switzerland allow a migration of large tonnage of silver to go to China and India? And I say, hell no. So once again, do we have a resolution of the industrial deficit in silver? No, not at all. Do we have a relaxation of demand in silver? No, of course not. Do we have a leasing problem in silver that has not been addressed properly and is going to explode in our faces? Yes. Did they double down about 3, 4, 5 times consecutively so that now it's not a double down, it's an 8-fold down. It's a 16-fold down. Do we have deliveries in silver in the first couple of days that equal the entire previous month? Yes. Have we resolved anything in the silver market? No. So if you're all bent out of shape, that we've gone from 35 back down to 30, grow a pair. Grow up. Allow the system to break. We're soon going to see magnificent differences, I call the delta, between the COMEX New York gold price and the Shanghai gold price. It got as high as a $110 difference. We're likely to see a $2 difference in silver. And if you sign up for the Hat Trick newsletter on the Golden-Jackass website, you can read about my theory regarding reverse arbitrage. Buy high outside the United States, bring it into the United States, and sell it low. When people say, oh, but Jim, they'd lose money. Of course they'd lose money. And if the silver market goes over 40, they lose 100 times more money. I don't care about a double top. What I care about is that silver's had a really hard time getting above 32 and 33, and there's always a huge paper attack, and they're not doubling down. They're quadrupling down. They're 8-fold increasing. They're 16-fold increasing. They're building a coiled spring where if it breaks, we don't go to 37 and 38. We go to 57 and 58 and then 70. That's how much pressure they're putting on with these shorts. We're not going to go to 40. That's not even going to be a coffee rest stop. We're going to go over 50. And if they continue this game, we're going to go over 50. Pardon me. And in a matter of days or a couple of weeks, we go to 80. 10, 20, 30, 50, 80 Fibonacci. They're creating a disaster. They're buying time. They're not doubling down. They're quadrupling down. They're 8-fold down. They're 16-fold down. They're not fixing anything. The leasing is exploding. They're trying to break Sprott's PSLV. It's not going to work. Trying to access the silver. It's not going to work. We're going to see a short squeeze like you haven't seen in 30 or 40 or 50 years.
The powers that be, could they be forcing stock markets down on purpose to make President Trump look bad?
Yeah, but Trump might be doing it somewhat on his own volition and motives to create more treasury bond demand. Okay, nothing is simple in the financial and economics. Nothing. Especially after manipulation, controls, and fake money and a debt upside down foundation. Nothing is simple. I've said now for 3 or 4 months that the powers that be, the cabal, they're going to want to have a big problem with the economy, a big problem in the financial markets in order to blame Trump. But Trump wants lower interest rates. And as the 10-year bond goes down in yield, it'll add pressure to Jerome Powell at the Fed to lower short-term interest rates. That's what Trump wants. So if they think they're destroying Trump, they're nuts. They're playing into his hand. The question is, will we see a revival, a rebound in the stock market after we get some good news with respect to trade negotiation and foreign direct investment in a big way with fast-tracking regulatory approval, tax breaks like income tax and property tax, and getting production in the fast track like in 6 to 9 months? I have my doubts that it'll happen. I'm hoping that there are some instances where it does. We're going to see.
Is the NASDAQ stock index versus the money supply a good indicator of anything?
Yeah, it's a good indicator of a bubble. When they lower interest rates having to do with the fake pandemic and lock down the economy to eliminate activity, and you get a rise in the stock market, that's pure bogus. So you got to be careful about what you're looking at and put it up against a past perspective of what's normal and be very careful. The money supply is increasing, and here's a sick, I'm going to speak in very rough statistics form. We're having to increase the money supply about $8 just to get $1 in economic activity. It might be up to 10 to 1. Okay, that's a failed system. So you can't look at a failed system and look at an indicator and say that will tell me anything, except that it's not working. It used to be that, just a $1.50 would create $1 in new activity in GDP, and now it's 8 to 1 or 10 to 1. Okay, we're in broken situation scenario. So be careful of what you think is an index and an indicator of anything.
Do you think Tesla TSLA on NASDAQ has a huge short position?
It probably does, by the same people funding the Democrat mobs that are vandalizing Tesla charging centers and sales centers. What they've ended up doing is not destroying Tesla, the company, so much, and not ruining Elon Musk. He could handle a $50 billion hit to his portfolio. Most Americans don't even know what his net worth is, but it's mostly on paper. What they've ended up doing is they've gotten him angry. And when Elon Musk is angry, he exposes corruption, fraud, and passes the investigative data and results as evidence to the Department of Justice for prosecution. So by attacking Tesla and maybe making some money on shorts, what they've ended up doing is they might have exposed Alex Soros, which might result in putting a bounty on his head. Okay, this is war. And if we're going to allow a fellow who comes from Hungary, whose father was a war criminal in World War II, gathering billions from his own people's dental assets, if we allow Alex to do this, then we're going to be permitting the destruction of our country. Okay, we've got Alex Soros who funded and promoted Kamala Harris. Was she an effective leader? Was she an effective official even in California? Not in the least. Can she put together 30 words that make sense? Not in the least. So Alex Soros is funding the hands-off movements, and what's it called? Act One. There's a particular NGO group that's funding the Democrat riots, and they're getting caught. And Elon Musk is revealing this. Elon Musk is working. I don't know if we're going to get to the judges, but I'll just say, when you anger Elon Musk, you better be prepared for dealing with an angry man with a lot of resources, a lot of intellect, a lot of power of his gab. He's a brilliant speaker. And when I listen to him speak, I wonder, is that a programmed cyborg? Because he just sounds so well-versed and prepared.
For years, Democrats have been buying Teslas. Now Democrats are vandalizing Teslas that are likely owned by Democrats. Does that make sense?
Does anything that the Democrats do make sense with the perspective toward growth of an economy, stability of a nation, and healthy political structure? No, no, and no. Most Democrats have trouble figuring out what gender they are after stepping out of the shower even. I've never had less respect for a political group in my entire life. They're self-destructive, they're psychotic, and they're brainwashed. I haven't found too many Democrats who even know how to think for themselves.
We'll have more with Jim Willie right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
You're listening to goldradio.fm. Available online at HowStreet.com, TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jim Willie. Jim, do you think President Trump's tariff wars are already showing signs of success?
Yeah. The success is in pledges for foreign direct investment and pledges for American corporations, the multinationals in particular, for bringing back production to the United States. So it's for foreign direct investment and American corporations coming back home. And I highlight in the March newsletter, found at golden-jackass.com, that there's at least $3 trillion in foreign direct investment pledges. I include the U.S. multinationals coming home. Like Johnson & Johnson made a big commitment for bringing production back to the United States. And they are very diverse. They're the largest of the pharmaceutical companies. They got their head in the noose somewhat with an mRNA vaccine, but they produce a lot of things, including, just simple medical equipment that's not controversial, like tape, I don't know, crutches. Just a lot of different things that Johnson & Johnson makes. Okay, the tariff wars have to first bring the direct investment. I call it foreign direct investment, even if it's multinational U.S. corps. First, I need to get the pledges. Then they've got to get the actual plant equipment, training, job training, and the downstream businesses, like for cars, auto parts, like for computers, production, the accessories, the disk drives, the little credit card things, items. They're not credit card, but they look like a credit card. The devices for the laptop computers that are made. Okay, downstream industries. The challenge for Trump is not so much getting pledges. The challenge is getting the pledges into actual plant and equipment purchases, job training contracts, downstream business creation, and a lot of other things. And Trump has a new problem, and he can thank Wall Street corruption for that. We've been talking the last couple of months about a conversion of Treasury bonds to equity, to plant and equipment shares. Stock shares for plant and equipment. Like for instance, General Motors has a cooperative plan with Toyota, and they're going to be building 3 new plants in the United States. Well, you do that by raising funds, expanding the stock offerings, purchasing the stock in the secondary market and getting to work purchasing the land. And I actually know somebody in Boston who was involved with land purchase. He was a commercial property agent, and he was a good friend of mine. And I was a friend of his family for Thanksgiving dinners and all kinds of different things. So I learned a bit. Trump has a problem, and that is J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan had fraudulent treasury bond transactions, duplicating the serial numbers, and storing all the data in Building 7 of the World Trade Center, which got detonated and demolished to remove the evidence. Now they've got all kinds of treasury bonds out there that are bogus, fraudulent treasury bonds. So, is Trump and his Department of Treasury going to honor all treasury bonds, knowing many of them are fraudulent, and a conversion to equity? No, he's not going to do that. He's got a new problem. I don't know what he's going to do. The debt to equity project is on hold because of the J.P. Morgan fraudulent treasury bond activity in the volume of at least a couple of trillion, and the demolition of Building 7 at the World Trade Center that included a lot of dead people. Good luck, Trump. I'm telling you, we have got such incredible corruption and fraud problems in the United States. It's unspeakable and indescribable, the level. But Trump, it's like a three-step process. First, we threaten the tariff and hoping that we can get a mutual agreement where neither side has any tariffs, and there's a significant amount of foreign direct investment. And step two is getting the pledges. Step three is buying the plant and equipment, training, and downstream businesses. Step four is the actual production, output, and income sources for millions of new workers, and bringing down the prices because we have a supply, not a flood, but a good flow of supply. And remember, the Democrats did everything they could to destroy the entire supply chain. And they're going to get called out for it. And I'm making a call here. We're going to have like a 50-50 chance that by the end of the Trump 2 administration in 2026, we're going to have a 50-50 chance whether the Democrat Party is even on the ballot for being declared a terrorist organization, domestic terrorists, vandals, and loaded with treason among its leadership. We could be seeing the death of the Democrat Party. And I expected this. They had to expose themselves in the last 4 years, and they did a really good job.
Mark Carney was selected to be Prime Minister of Canada by Liberal insiders when Parliament was about to reopen after being prorogued by Justin Trudeau, and Carney didn't have a seat. He called for an election for April 28th. What are you hearing about Mark Carney?
That he's a pervert, that he's a pedophile, that he's a cabal banker wonk, that he is a joke, that he has no mandate, he has no popular support. All he has is support by the parliamentary corruption corner and the banker set in England and Switzerland. I'll make a prediction. By the end of the year, he won't be your prime minister. You'll have a different one. And in 6 months, that one will be replaced again. Like a rolling new prime minister, unelected, that doesn't last very long, one after the other, because your country is broken politically, and your Royal Canadian Mounted Police are part of your vile fraud and corruption. They're your Praetorian Guard. They're doing nothing. They're now protecting Carney. How much are they getting paid? Okay, you need to clean up your parliament, and you're not getting anywhere. You need to clean up your voting process, and you're not getting anywhere. And you need to clean up your prime minister's office, and you're not getting anywhere. So this guy will be mocked, jeered, and yelled at out of office, he'll get tired after a while. I mean, he's getting yelled at press conferences. No leader will tolerate that for more than a couple months. They'll either have to arrest these people or stage the audience with paid people who love Carney. And I think you Canadians are going to get really, really fed up quickly. And then Carney's going to resign. He's not going to be able to get much done. He's going to talk to the people, and they're going to throw apples and tomatoes at him. They're doing exactly what they did to Trudeau or his replacement right now with Carney. They didn't give him a chance. They shouldn't give him a chance. So let him leave in a few months, several months, and you have another one until you do something about your Royal Canadian Mounted Police and your leaders of parliament and your bankers and your election process. I was very privy to the election of the mayor in Toronto a couple of years ago. Sky won something like 80% to 20, and the Chinese lady, a cabal animal, she was declared the winner like 53 to 47 or 52 to 48. Sky won about 80 to 20.
Where is Justin Trudeau?
Who gives a shit?
Is President Trump's focus on fentanyl trafficking working?
No, not really, because Canada is too corrupt, and that's the source that China decided to be the primary entry points. So the Canadian Parliament set up a task force to control it, and they decided not to have it function. So Trump had declared a dysfunctional control from Canada, and that's aggravated the tariff war. So Canada's political structure doesn't work, not even close. Nothing in your political structure works, period. And you're not up in arms. You're just angry and, I don't know, planning something. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Write some letters to the parliament? You need to take action or else lose your country.
Trade wars between Canada and the U.S., what do you think President Trump's art of the deal might be?
I don't think it's to annex Canada and make your prime minister the governor. I think that's lunatic talk. And you know, if you take a close look at what Trump talks about, a good 5% is pure comedy, nonsense, lunatic crapola. He calls the United States a burgeoning, growing economy when we're stuck in a depression. He thinks the tariffs are going to bring about income to the Treasury and the federal government when it's really going to be a tax on the consumers. And he has some wild notion that the United States is entitled to Ukrainian minerals when the Russian military is sitting on them. And now he's turning a blind eye to genocide in Gaza. So, you know, Trump has got some pretty weird characteristics and behaviors. I think what we might possibly see is a breakdown of Canada where maybe to start off, Alberta will ask for admission to the United States Union. I mean, if Ottawa and your government doesn't work and is a, you know, sock puppet for Beijing and the Chinese Communist Party, and you don't have any electoral power for deciding who your prime minister is, why not make an appeal to join the United States? Your country is broken and it's pathetic. My country, United States, was broken and pathetic, and we finally managed to control the election result. We didn't control the election. We controlled the election result. I think Donald Trump won at least 20% more than was recognized, like 55 to 45 or whatever, roughly. I think it was more like 75 to 25. That's Trump's margin of victory. So we at least controlled the result. You didn't even have an election for your prime minister. And is anybody demonstrating out in front of Ottawa? Do you have millions demonstrating? No, you're not doing jack shit. You're not doing anything. Are you pressing your Royal Canadian Mounted Police directors and executives? Are you looking at their bank accounts with offshore indirectly from China for bribery? No, you're not doing anything.
By eliminating the welfare state, are illegal immigrants likely to deport themselves?
Absolutely. Trump just put in a very interesting executive order a few days ago that a daily fine of $950 or $980 or something just short of $1,000 would be imposed on any illegal immigrant who doesn't leave voluntarily. And you know, my first response was, they don't have any money, but they do. They have United Nations and Alex Soros debit cards. And those debit cards can be confiscated. They also have cell phones. And maybe they're not worth more than like $80, but they can be confiscated by the thousands. Okay, I think we're going to have some good progress with the illegal immigrants. And what I like about the immigrant battle is that it's exposing the federal judges and their corruption. Because the federal judges installed by Biden and many by, mostly by Obama, they're doubling down. They're just digging in. They're trying to block executive orders, and they're getting identified, and some of them are backing down and now supporting Trump. And the Supreme Court now has, I think, 3 consecutive decisions in favor of Trump regarding his agenda and executive orders for firing and for eliminating slush funds, etc. So I enjoy the focus on the judges because they don't have any constitutional legs to stand on. And right now, we're going to see Boasberg, Judge James Boasberg, installed by Obama, a Marxist piece of garbage. We're going to see Boasberg removed from the bench, and I'm not sure exactly how, whether it will be a forced resignation or whether it will be an arrest and a trip to Guantanamo for tribunals, treason, or whether it'll be something else that I just can't imagine at this point. But the illegal immigrants are very useful now. We're going to be talking about illegal immigrants a year from now, 18 months from now. There's so many of them, and some of them have produced children. And there's a battle over whether their marriage, while in illegal status, if that marriage is actually legitimate. I say no, it's not. So there's a lot of battle going on, and it's going to continue for well over another year. There are too many of them.
Klaus Schwab is stepping down as head of the World Economic Forum. Could this be the beginning of the end of Agenda 2023 or 2030?
I have a different perspective on this. I think Klaus Schwab was killed a year ago. What they're doing now is they're killing his name. I mean, it doesn't take much to fool most people in the population. Most people did not recognize Biden as a fake. I recognized him as a fake within 2 weeks. I said, let me see that picture. Let me see that again. That's not Biden. That's the wrong smile. It's the wrong nose. It's the wrong eyes. So fooling the American people is absolutely simple. Fooling Canadians is not quite as simple. Fooling Western Europeans, I think, is quite easy also. Klaus Schwab continues as a figure, and we don't know if he's human. We don't know if it's an avatar. We don't know if it's a clone. But by him stepping down, it means to me they're killing his name. So he cannot be in discussions. He cannot have a discussion. He cannot have an opinion. He cannot have a policy that he's trying to impose in the New World Order. He'll go away. They're killing his name. He died a year ago. Wake up. the beginning of the end for Agenda 2030? Yeah, the election of Donald Trump is the end of Agenda 2030. We're no longer in the World Health Organization. The IMF will be defunded. NATO is going to be defunded and rely, I think, exclusively on money laundering from underground operations. We're altering the Center of Disease Control, CDC. Trump is going to make sure that there is no health mandate. He's going to assist in medical-related wrongful death lawsuits, class action types. Agenda 2030, it died with the inauguration and election of Trump.
Marine Le Pen, the French political leader, was sentenced to jail for 4 years and not allowed to run for president for 5 years. What are you hearing?
I heard that Team Trump and the White Alliance, with some global military muscle, got a reversal of that, and that needs to play out. Marine Le Pen is an interesting figure. 2 years ago, she won an election. She beat Macron, who has a nickname of Maricon, which is Spanish for gay boy. The Spanish call Macron Maricon, and that is slang for gay man. Marine Le Pen won the election, and word had it that she was given 300 million euros to go away and not challenge the stolen election. So now she's back. The French judges are no better than the Biden and Obama judges in the United States. They're just political appendages for throwing weight around and just forcing their will, the globalist will. This has to be played out. I read an article a week ago about how the judges backed down on their Marine Le Pen decision, and there's not been a lot of follow-up. So what I interpret that to mean is that we have some division and disunity among the French judges. Their judicial sector is not in unison. Let's just wait and see how this plays out.
Ottawa Police Service Detective Helen Gruss was found guilty of discreditable conduct for investigating the sudden deaths of babies following the COVID vaccines. Your thoughts?
I don't know much about that particular case, but let it just be said that investigating vaccine XX, it's double C if it's positive and it's double X if it's intended to kill. The people who are investigating and speaking out regarding the deadly nature of the vaccine with double X, the mRNA, messenger RNA, they're going to be vindicated. I don't know if they're going to get compensated for abusive behavior and, confiscation of banks and fines and all that other nonsense that the judges like to do with their political decisions. Ottawa is pathetic. That's where your parliament is. Let's just see how it plays out. Let's see if there's another person who speaks up about defense of babies. Okay, murdering babies and mistreating babies with ceremonies that result in black eyes, that's about as low as you can get in society. So we're talking about baby murder, and there are 1 million babies in the United States who got vaccinated with the double X. So what does that say? Where do we go from here as a society if it's not even a case of protecting children? It's a case of destroying babies. Okay, we now have a situation in the United States where there are millions of women under the age of 35 going through menopause. They're in shock. They're 29, 32. They're going into menopause. They're not going to be having more children. So this is part of the genocide. The genocide. David Rockefeller boasted that he invested $50 billion in this deadly vaccine to destroy the human race and bring down the population 90%. You know, when you bring down a population 90%, you run the risk of destroying it 100% because it's a big momentum going downhill and hard to stop. We need to stop this immediately. We need to put these people in prison. We need to sack their bank accounts. We need to follow them and figure out exactly where their agents are, where their slush funds are, NGOs are, where the bribery is. Just start over with the the Food and Drug Administration. I think they're going to disband the FDA and rebuild it. It's 2/3 funded by Big Pharma. Okay, this is insane. Okay.
Are Democrats and rhino Republicans highly vaccinated, and what could that mean for the future of politics in America?
Well, it means their psychosis will get even worse. The rhino Republicans are I think, at direct risk right now. The Republican administration with Trump, they're digging down and investigating bribery and financial records of the rhinos to get them out. And they're going to have primaries before long, maybe not be for another year, but they're going to be removed. The rhinos are actually at more risk than the Democrats because they betrayed their own people. So their own people are going to investigate them. And maybe they'll switch to become Democrats, but that won't stop the investigation. They're highly vaccinated, which means they might get sick. You know, people like Edward Dowd, who I respect a lot, is talking about a wave of very sick and dying people in the next year or two for the prolonged, delayed effects of destroying an immune system from the vaccine with a double X. I think we're likely to see more chronically sick people than dead people, and I think we might soon see something very, very unusual, positive gene editing to repair the immune system at the chromosomal level. Positive gene editing to reverse the damage of the negative gene editing. You know, they even told us, like 2 months after the vaccine was released, they said, this is a gene editing tool. And I said, yeah, to destroy the immune system. This is not a vaccine. They're telling you it's a gene editing. They're doing things to your genetic structures, and they're just leaving out the word destructive. They're not doing anything positive. They're doing destructive activity to your immune system chromosomal structures that you can't recognize cancer. So it becomes turbo cancer. So you can't fight diseases because you can't recognize them very well. So you don't put to work your antibodies, the chemical soldiers, to surround and kill invaders. I think we're going to see a lot of politicians drop out of office for health reasons and for pressure from discovered bribery.
What's the latest on the Communist Party of China infiltration of North America?
Oh, it's hard to say. I think it's being discovered, and the principal area where I think it might get publicized after discovered will be the entire California state government. I think they've bribed most every major office in the California state government. I know personally from a source that the lieutenant governor receives $50 million a year from the Chinese Communist Party, the lieutenant governor. Okay, they cannot withstand two things in California: honest elections and investigations for fraud for where did the money vanish to, where to go. What happened to all the money for the homeless projects? What happened to the money for the high-speed train? Well, they're discovering that it was stolen by Gavin Newsom, the governor, and his friends. Not him alone. All right, so that's how you undermine the Communist Party of China and their infiltration. You expose their fraud, their influence, and you get their leaders out of office. And then you get a Republican, a conservative, a patriot who refuses the Chinese bribery. But then they might start killing and, abducting children. The new Republican governor of California is complaining now that his 8-year-old little girl was abducted. Okay, this is how the criminal syndicate operates. And we're going to see very soon that the Democrat Party is going to be identified as domestic terrorists and a criminal organization. That's how you get rid of the Chinese infiltration. Identify their people, show the fraud.
Could chemtrails be coming to an end?
I think there's going to be a battle. There's been no battle for all this time. No battle at all. Just recognition and, soil sampling, water sampling, snowpack sampling. Yeah, there's been analysis. There's been no challenge. No one has said, we're going to take a Stinger missile and put it up against that chemtrail plane. We have had a whistleblower from the pilot crew talking about how the operations work. And they pay the pilots triple with a non-disclosure agreement that if they talk about it, their entire family will be murdered. These are criminal organizations operating against the people. So what I expect to happen is we're going to get whistleblowers who don't have families and are willing to go into witness protection programs and live in Alaska or live in Arizona or live in Malta or live in the French Riviera. Whistleblowers. And they will be largely found and killed because the crime syndicate centered in Geneva has a lot of smart people for their investigations. We're going to see a battle. Trump has said that we're going to do some analysis, we're going to do some investigations, we're going to have some conclusions, we're going to identify the dangers, we're going to out the different groups that are funding it. They need to talk to the whistleblowers and offer them protection. And, drop a dime. I love drop a dime. Anonymous information provided, but even that is dangerous. If there's some unique information about a particular project that only had 2 or 3 people involved in it, then dropping a dime on it will not keep that whistleblower safe. So it has to be general information that applies to dozens and dozens of pilots. We are seeing a reduction in the chemtrails. They're not gone. They come up once in a while just to remind you that you don't have this thing solved. It's the Bush crime family. And nobody talks about the Bush crime family. Nobody.
Do you think President Trump has a plan to get rid of the deficit and debt of the U.S. government?
His plan to get the deficit down, and that's going to take a few years, is production, output, employment, investment, the movement from pledge to reality in plant equipment, jobs, training, and downstream businesses. That's going to take a few years. That's the plan. That's his plan. Reindustrialize America. That's the plan. It sounds easy, and it's extraordinarily difficult, and you've got to get hundreds of different municipalities to be cooperative. And I'm seeing that there are dozens, but not hundreds. There's confiscation of Chinese land that's going on right now, and that's a good sign. But the deficit requires industrial output. Let's stop buying from China and begin buying from U.S. made. Well, we spent 30 years to destroy our economy for the industrial sector. You think it's going to get all fixed in 9 months? I don't think it's going to get all fixed in 3 years. It's going to take time. Okay, that's the deficit side. The debt, that's a completely different matter. I think there's going to be a few very clever devices. I'm not giving up on the debt to equity conversion. If they can prove that their treasury bonds were legitimately purchased and not fake, which means that J.P. Morgan was not their agent, just to begin with. I mean, I'd like to see J.P. Morgan shut down. I'd like to see all their assets confiscated with RICO. What about them is not a crime syndicate? Okay. Regarding the debt, there is a chance, and, I've had this brought up a few times by a couple of, deeper sources that I have. And I don't have dozens. I have several. I don't have 12. I have more like 4 or 5. There is a chance that a lot of gold is going to be brought to the table to cover the debt. And that gold will be used to spread around the world, our globe, in order to put in place the gold foundation for the financial structure and for, economic stability. The banks are going to undergo tremendous changes because we're about to head into peer-to-peer and business-to-business transactions with QFS and, XRP. And if you don't regard XRP as a bargain under $2, you're just brain dead. Brain dead. Okay, so the debt might be covered, but I think what Trump is trying to do now is determine who is our friend and who is our foe. And with our friend, we're going to redeem, perhaps, this is the wild card, with our friend who is doing foreign direct investment, we will do conversion of treasuries to equity, and we will redeem some of your gold, maybe a portion, like a quarter or 1/10 or something, I don't know. It's hard to say. We will redeem part of your debt with gold, and you will use that for their national financial structures, their foundation, and we'll move merrily along. And the nations that are determined to be our foe will not get any gold for redemption. So we're not ready to do gold redemption because we haven't really figured out who's our friend and who's our foe. I think in the long run, Russia will be our friend, and Switzerland will be our foe. I'm expecting an open, hot war, maybe that is triggered this year, between the U.S. military and NATO.
RFK Jr. is talking about banning big pharma ads from television. Is this likely to affect mainstream media?
Yeah, I hadn't heard that, but that's a great idea. Every time I hook into a U.S. channel, I get bombarded with big pharma advertisements that are so onerous that I change the channel. Big pharma, if they're a crime syndicate and they are subject to RICO applications, they should not be in a position to advertise anywhere, because what they're advertising is bad health and death. Bad health and death. So Robert Kennedy has got his work cut out. This is a very difficult job that he's agreed to take on. And I wonder, what has he done with regard to his extended family? I don't really know, but I expect that he might be a grandfather. What is he doing with his kids, who are probably in their 30s now? What is he doing with his grandkids? Are they having armed escorts to go to school and go to work? Okay, these are the people who are vulnerable to Robert Kennedy's very constructive and patriotic actions.
When do you think we'll start seeing the arrests of recognizable names?
2 or 3 years ago. When will we see publicity of those names? I don't know. I'm thinking sometime this year. The arrests began 2 or 3 years ago. And people who don't know that, you're just way behind the curve. You really don't know what's going on. You're probably not even trying to find out what's going on. If you sign up for the newsletter at golden-jackass.com, you'll be much better informed about what's going on in your own world that might have a direct effect on your health and your financial situation. I think we're going to get information and disclosure of names who've been arrested and executed sometime this year. This year. The arrest began 2 or 3 years ago.
Where can our listeners subscribe to the Hat Trick Letter and get your latest issue that's hot off the press?
Well, it's golden-jackass.com. And this month, I will have my 21st anniversary. And I'm still going strong. I'm being harmed by very unusual, I believe, demonic type events. I actually had a really close friend say, Jim, when you say that, you're gonna lead people to think that you're nuts. And I say, well, maybe they need to understand that we're in a global war of good versus evil, of God versus Satan. We're in a global war right now. I'm being harmed because I'm very bold and sometimes too bold and outspoken about details of what these creatures, these fascist creatures, are doing and how they're harming the human race, the global economy, national borders, and, even gender recognition. I mean, how stupid is a person who says, I'm a non-binary, I'm not male or female? How stupid is that? Okay, so I talk rather boldly about a lot of different things, and in particular about child crimes. I love kids. I sometimes just watch them and marvel at how they're able to have fun with limited number of toys. They just, run in circles and chase each other and play tag, and that doesn't require any toys. They're little learning machines and loving machines. So it's our job to foster their growth, to put them in a situation where they can be secure, happy, well-fed, protected, and they grow. And we watch it and we marvel at that. That is not what the Democrats and the fascists out of Geneva are all about. They're involved in child-related crimes. They're involved in money laundering from the proceeds of such businesses. And I've been harmed. I've been harmed significantly. And sometimes it comes really close to home and it endangers lives for people that I'm close to. And that happened recently. So I ask people to sign up for my newsletter, support my work. If you don't like reading written newsletters and you just prefer the videos, then make donations once in a while. For Lord's sake, don't be a freeloader. Pay your freight. I'm working. If you're benefiting and you don't want the newsletter, make some donations. And I'm getting more of that since I've asked for it, and putting people on notice like that. Those are freeloaders. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't like paying for anything. I just go around the internet and I just, watch whatever I can that's free. Well, congratulations, you're a freeloader. People are taking risks. Like me. We're being harmed. People are taking risks. They're investing time. They're investing energy. They're taking on losses. They're having bizarre events. I've had 9 fires in the last 5 years. Those are events that are 1 in 100,000 per year. 1 fire, 1 in 100,000 homes per year. I've had 9 fires in the last 5 or 6 years. Some of them are sequential. Okay, sign up my newsletter, make a donation, make a consult call. If you're wealthy, hit the sponsor button, and let's move forward and defeat this nefarious enemy that wants to reduce the population by 90% and make everybody poor and under control for feeding purposes. You're a bad person. You're a disobedient person. You don't get your dinner tonight. That's what they want. Everybody poor, you'll own nothing, and you'll be happy. only if you're obedient and never speak out. I don't want to live in that kind of world, so I'm working toward a different world. And I'm no different from a guy putting on a uniform, taking a rifle, loading up grenades and magazine clips for my rifle, and getting shot. I'm no different from a soldier getting shot. People need to wake up to this war. This is a war against humanity and against our economy, which means against your job and your household and your ability to take care of your kids and your family. They want you to be broke. They don't care about your kids going to college. They don't care about your son or daughter starting a business at age 25. They want you poor, obedient, and you get a meal if you shut up. That's what we're dealing with. And they want a 90% reduction of the population. Wake up! What does that mean? Genocide! Genocide! Okay, I'm tired of trying to convince people to wake up that you've been an idiot and a fool and you've been conned. I'm tired of it, so I step back. I step back. If they want to get the booster, if they want to continue to vote Democrat, let them lose their job. Let them lose their car. Let them have repossession of their homes. Let them suffer if they can't wake up and learn. Anyway, thanks for having me on, Jim. It's always been good. Sorry about last week. I think we're back on track. Anyway, we'll see you in, I guess, 3 weeks or so. These are very dangerous times.